Hello all, Sam Dickinson from the Model Train People. Want to apologize for this episode getting out a little later than planned. I was having some issues with the audio recording on this, and it took a little longer than I would have preferred to really get it sounding as good as I could. And Ray Arnott from Around the Layout podcast recommended that I focus more on getting the audio sounding right for you all compared to getting it out on time, and I deeply appreciate and respect him for that advice. So hopefully you all understand as well, because I want to take pride in this podcast. I'm very happy to be involved in it, and I want to see it succeed. Quick reminder, we do still have our Allegheny Steam Gala going on October 10th through the 12th. Quick reminder for October 10th, we'll be at the East Broad Top Railroad and Rock Hill Trolley Museum in Rock Hill, Pennsylvania. On October 11th, we'll be at the Western Maryland Scenic in Cumberland, Maryland. And on October 12th, we will be chasing 611 between Goshen and Staunton, Virginia. Reminder that this is a completely free event. You're not obligated to show up, but we'd love to see you. And we are not associated with any of the groups or organizations that we're going to be involved with or participating at for this event. So, but yeah, we're still looking forward to seeing you there. I know it's going to be great fun. So yeah, we look forward to it. So I will stop talking again and we will get straight into the episode. Enjoy. All right, so I gotta ask, are any of you guys into football at all?
No.
No?
Extremely.
Great, I'm the only one. Yeah. The Detroit Lions had a really, really not good start to the season. Yeah.
Have they ever been good though? Like
if you haven't watched football the past few years, they have been amazing. They've been in the playoffs for the past like two seasons, maybe three, and then the last two seasons we've actually won division championships.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
Yeah, so we've been
that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, we've been number one in the NFC division for a while now, and I'm being a Detroit native. I've been very, very happy with them. So,
Understandably.
yeah. And I've never been interested in the Indianapolis Colts. A little more in the Tennessee Titans, but they are not as good either. So, yeah. But
yeah, I had the unfortunate case of like the Oakland Raiders being a decent team, but then they betrayed us for Las Vegas
and the gambling money.
And the 49ers betraying us for Santa Clara instead of San Francisco. So, like, right as I was about the age to actually start caring about football, they both, went turncoat on us. And it's like, well, okay, I might have been interested, but now.
Right, but.
Yeah, my whole family likes the Jets, so we just enjoy losing. So.
Yeah.
So we like the Jets and the Mets, so we just, we're gluttons for punishment.
No Patriots?
No.
Fair enough.
Absolutely not.
Fair enough. But, well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Model Train People podcast. A cold open, as usual, sharing more of our common interests and uncommon interests. So, yeah. All right. So, episode 2, we're making headway. Had to do a bit of work to get that first episode working. Took me about 3 tries just to save it in the regular recording studio. before I could, like, every time I would close it out, it would just completely lose it, even though I said save. So
The classic podcast struggle.
yes, exactly. So, but yeah, we're starting to get things adjusted. Hopefully the volumes for everyone are sounding a bit better. Still having to deal with that watermark issue, but we'll get there. People that are just the people that are listening, they don't know. There's no watermarks or anything, so it
No
will
audio mark.
exactly.
Thank God there's no audio mark like those licensed music places that say, audiomark.com every 30 seconds. And you're just like,
Audio Jungle. That was perfect timing. But anyway, it's time now for my very first official interview. And with us today, we have Miles Callan from Interurban Era. If you guys don't know what that is, it's a YouTube channel run by Miles, and he's got his railroads and everything on there. Miles, welcome to the podcast.
thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
It's been quite fun building out Interurban Era to not just be a YouTube channel, but like a vibrant Patreon environment and, a surprisingly zesty Instagram presence.
Yeah, I've never been much for Instagram, but now that I'm in charge and have to do the all the social media for the community, I'm gonna have to get back involved in it again. But yeah,
Be the guy.
but the nice thing is you can control the algorithm and what it sends to you by controlling what you type in and what you look at. So
Yeah.
it'll make things easier. But anyway, to not get too far off track, Miles, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the hobby?
Okay, so currently I professionally build model railroads on site at people's homes.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I build modular layouts and deliver them on site. But that's my main bread and butter day job. I made it my day job circa 2019, and it's been lovely ever since. And the short version of how I got into the hobby is I was basically at age 3 a mascot for a local train club in Southern California. It was very fun. As I mentioned, like I got my first electric shock there as a small child, and got to run my first HO scale train and get to see what scenery was like and see what you could do with the hobby. And not that long after, that club gave me an N-scale coffee table layout from the 70s, which was a hilarious thing to give a 3-year-old, let's be honest. But you want to go for a larger train than N-scale, but I still had a lot of fun with it, and I still have some of the pieces from it today.
Nice.
At age 5, I was given the classic Target Bachmann train set, of which I'm sure many people have had or portions of over the years, and that gave me my lifelong love for HO scale, which, except for a brief moment in my tweens, have basically been modeling ever since. And yeah, that's basically the short of it.
Okay.
Nice.
Now, for those of you who don't know, we had kind of tried to record this episode before. It did not go as planned. So if you hear us
Slightly derailed.
yeah, slightly. Well, yeah.
It's not the episode that we were intending.
Yeah, and since this is my first time being the head of this, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, as fun as that episode was, it's a little too derailed, so we're gonna re-record this. So we've had this conversation before, but you're hearing it for the first time. Now, I do recall in that previous one, you had mentioned something about you did take a small hiatus in the hobby. You want to talk about that?
I left twice in my life. I remember the first time I got out of trains when I was living in an Ace Bay city that was very poorly served by Union Pacific, and I talked to my dad at a railroad crossing, and a couple of Dash 9s in yellow UP Armor Yellow rolled by for the 10,000th time, and I said, "Dad, I don't know if I want to stay in trains anymore. They're all boring. They're like AC-44 whatever. I can't take this. And so I think I was 10 at the time, and I spent a couple of years getting enamored with military aircraft and playing with Legos, that kind of thing. And dove back in my early teens when I moved to another town that had a better train club and far more interesting rail fanning. And then I dipped out again in my mid-20s when I went off to industrial design school and also did a year at an industrial design firm in Turin, Italy. And I did train things during that time, especially in Italy. I got embedded with the local museum in Turin, which was fantastic to help out there. That's a story for another time, but it's a good story. But yeah, at the time I didn't model, especially during school, because I was already, for industrial design school, you have to constantly sketch and build actual physical models and pitch those ideas to teachers about what you want to do. And so it just took up all the time that I would have done having fun building model trains.
Right.
That was the one nice thing about my time in design school as going to school for architecture is I also had a really good train club at my school, so I was able to kind of commingle. But when you don't have that, it's very easy to let that school design and school modeling take up all your time. So I get it.
Yeah.
Believe me, when I was choosing schools, there's only a few schools around the world that are respected for industrial design. But I also had like a second secret factor of like, well, what if I went to Rensselaer so I could go be part of the Model Railroad Club at Rensselaer? And I almost did it. But I didn't. There wasn't a major that I felt comfortable going into, with the fringe benefit being the major reason why I went to the school instead of the primary educational benefit. So I stayed here in the Bay.
Okay. I don't have any right here. That's me.
Excellent.
Yeah,
it's a great layout.
Unfortunately in pieces, but that's a story for another time.
Oh, you've already started disassembling it?
Oh, it's been disassembled for more than 5 years now. But...
I thought you were talking about the BCCS.
No. This is the RPI Train Club.
Ah, okay. I apologize.
Right.
Now, in Italy, outside of the museum that you mentioned, were you involved in railroads anywhere else?
No, not really. What I did is, when I was in Italy, I volunteered at the museum in downtown Turin, which was magnificent. And then they would take me on little field trips. It's like, oh, you have to see this. One of the most fascinating ones is Torino has more than a few roundhouses still, and they're still used by the state railways.
Oh, wow.
One of which I went to was an electric roundhouse. Where they had strung catenary into every stall, and then all 72 of the wires met above the turntable in this.
Okay, that's cool.
It was fascinating.
Amazing.
Right.
And we got to climb all over all of the electric locomotives that were in the depot, and just have a great time. It's one of my most cherished railfan memories because it was so rare.
Right. Now, in our previous interview, you did mention something, and that this was the one topic that kind of got us off track, but it's one that I still want to have included. You mentioned something in your career over in Italy that involved trains.
Oh, yes, of course. So while I was working at Ital Design Giugiaro, I was tasked to do a wide variety of things, appliances, vehicle accessories, and all of this. And then one day I was walking through the office coming back from lunch, and on a coworker's desk was a drawing for a really weird locomotive. And I asked her what this was about. And she said, I have to design this paint scheme for this demonstrator locomotive. And I'm like, okay, interesting. So it's like, could I have a crack at it? Can you send me the Illustrator file so I can play with it? And she said, sure. So she sent it to me over to my desk and started messing around with it. And what it ended up being was a natural gas demonstrator for the Russian state railways. And keep in mind, this was 2013, so it was a long time ago when you think about it. So I was messing around with all sorts of interesting paint schemes and everything, and she was as well. Mm-hmm. And then we pitched all of the different paint schemes to the client, the Briansk Locomotive Works, and they loved my concept, and they ended up painting up their demonstrator, which I do not know Cyrillic letters, but if you type in TEM 19-001, you will find that locomotive, which premiered at the Rail Expo in 2014. Since then, it has been touring around and doing various load testing and stuff. I'm curious if it's still in its original configuration over a decade later, but it is a bizarre locomotive. So,
it is. I'm looking at the photos of it right now, which is something I didn't get to do last time. And yeah, it's bizarre. Like, if you think the battery electric locomotives or genset locomotives are weird, this is even weirder. It's like a stub nose, high nose, and it has a tank, literal tank, on the very back of it. It's a very bizarre design, but the paint scheme on it is really, really creative. Like, it kind of in my opinion, like, it combines, like, the blue of, like, the natural gas with, like, the green of the leaf to represent, like, ecologically friendly. And, like, that's a creative design. I love that. So,
thank you.
Yeah, congratulations on that.
The viewers, the Soviets built copies of the Alco MRS-1 in the 40s. And the locomotive that it's built on top of is similar, but it has a full-height hood. So imagine in your mind's eye, perhaps, an Alco-looking SD9 in which the long hood has been replaced with a giant pressurized natural gas tank.
Yes.
So, like the one you would have in your backyard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
And the craziest part about that design is when you think about paint schemes, you think of like an F unit with flowing lines and everything. This is probably the most challenging project I've ever had to do graphic design-wise, because it's two wildly different shapes that you have to unify.
Oh, yeah.
And it was very fun to do so. I was so pleased that it came out as so well and that they executed my original paint specifications so closely to my original sketches, which I still have lying around in this workshop.
As you should.
In a folder. And, it was just immensely fun.
Nice.
I would love to do more paint scheme designs for other, hopefully, North American corporations or perhaps Western European corporations. But it was a blast.
Nice.
10 out of 10 would recommend.
Now, would you say that was what really got you kind of into what you're doing now in the modeling side? Like that design?
It certainly deeply informed what eventually became known as the Alta California, which is my prototype freelance railroad. Now, just a shorthand for people who may not be familiar with prototype freelancing, it is, imagine if you've ever seen the Utah Belt or other freelance railroads that modelers have created entire corporate images for, and then stuck to that prompt.
Yeah,
it's an accurate world, but it's a fictional brand. Yes.
Oh boy, the cat's back.
So, doing that design work in Italy definitely informed my desire to explore graphic design for models, and also to do some historical research into, like, what were accurate colors for the periods in which I was designing them, what were the graphic elements that were common and even in some cases forward-thinking for the eras in which they were applied. And for instance, I have a couple of different paint schemes that represent a lifetime of the Alta California, from its merger in 1927, which became the Alta, all the way till when it disappeared sometime in the 90s or early 2000s, which patrons will be able to choose at a later date when I write those conflicting stories. But it boils down to two types of paint scheme, which I'll describe to our listeners. The first is the 1939 to 1946 citrus paint scheme, which is very, similar to Florida East Coast in a way, also similar to the White Pass in Yukon, also similar to the Argentinian state railways, where it's a nice Alco bow wave in orange on a locomotive that was painted a pale yellow, upon which the roofs and underframe are a dark olive green. And that was applied until 1966. And then after that, in anticipation of the 1968 Mexico Games, we did the Olympic scheme, which we're not officially calling the Olympic scheme for IOC reasons. It was inspired by the Olympic Games, and it is a striking orange, white, and magenta paint scheme. The colors are directly picked from the actual style guide from the 60s that were done for the game. So there's a reason why magenta exists. And a lot of people are shocked to see, like, pink on a train.
Yeah.
What is this? And viewers or railroad bus will recall the Detroit, Toledo, and an Ironton had auto parts boxcars that were also painted magenta.
Oh, yeah. So we had magenta, we had baby blue, we had both olive green and I believe a mint julep green. We had the DT and I had quite the variety of their auto parts boxcars for sure. And then of course the DTSL's bright blue with their red box logo added to that look. So yeah, I'm all too familiar with those. I've got at least 2 of the pink ones sitting in my box right now. So yeah.
Because I wanted to make it distinctive but believable. And I feel like the cornerstone of any prototype freelance model railroad is believability. So I very carefully, I'm also somewhat of a typography nerd and a graphic design nerd, and I love looking back through original in-context historical uses for typefaces, which you might know as fonts in general terms. But the history of typefaces is a fascinating rabbit hole I will not go into. You should dig around, starting with the Wikipedia page for Futura, the typeface. That will unlock a whole world to you of things that you never thought about before. Anyway, thinking about typefaces and the years in which they existed and the years in which they are popular is extremely important to making a believable paint scheme. I feel a lot of people who do prototype freelance or attempt to do so forget that some of the typefaces that they choose were not even thought of in the years that they're modeled. Or they had fallen so far out of style by then that they shouldn't be used anymore. And so it's something to keep in mind.
You pointed it out to me about my railroad. I was sharing some of my stuff, and so for a lot of my more modern stuff, I've updated the font for some of the NCCS stuff. So I thank you for pointing that out to me.
You're welcome. It's always fun to make, I always look to embrace the joy in modeling and make sure that everybody has a great time with it. Because, I feel a lot of other modelers try and gatekeep or put down other people, and no, you want to do the reverse. You want to encourage. You want to be you want to be inspired by what exists and what could be if you apply your imagination to what you're doing in a believable manner. And it's super fun. And once you figure out that there's no new idea under the sun, it provides some leeway into thinking about how you might want to approach creating your own world.
Oh yeah, for sure. I've had my fair share of paint scheme designs and failures over the years. One of my first ones that I tried for was since I'm doing the Grand Trunk Western, one of the things that happened is in around 1971, right when they actually switched over from the Canadian National Black to Burdakin Blue. Around that same time, or within the first few years after, they ended up selling off their EMD F3s. And a lot of people speculated, what would Burdakin Blue look like on an F unit? And I tried... It's different, though, because, you don't have the zebra stripes, obviously. Canadian National had their own way of doing it. They kept the stripes, but then they switched so that the whole cab and nose were Morncy orange. But to me, that wouldn't look really good. So what I ended up doing is, because about the same time, Central Vermont came up with their double stripe green and gold scheme, what I decided to come up with is I'd keep the angle on the nose, but then completely repaint it Burdakin Blue, and then have those 2 white stripes go across, just like the Central Vermont had, and have the GT noodle kind of fit in with that. So to me, that kind of, it was like a way of blending two schemes that I really liked to make something that was more believable. So I completely understand where you're coming from on that.
Yeah, because like the Alto schemes took years and years to develop. Like seriously, like I started in 2015, and the first locomotive was painted in 2019. I want to say, other than like test mule shells that were like old AHM RS2s lying around or something.
Right.
But at any rate, like neither of the locomotive schemes that I designed are in a vacuum. You know, the earlier Citrus scheme is heavily inspired by early Alco and EMD schemes, while not being 100% exactly like an actual extant scheme. It is believable within its era. Same with this, the Mexico 68 scheme. You know, it's a white slash, which CN already did to some extent, and other railroads. And it uses Futura, a typeface that Union Pacific has used since the 20s, but done in a fresh way. Being very careful about how it's positioned on the locomotive, and like making sure that I also did not use Futura numbers. I used a different typeface that also existed in that era, because I noticed that the Futura numbers just didn't work well with the unit. And like knowing when stuff doesn't work and actually listening to your gut when it comes to that, and not going like, oh, it'll be okay. Because when you're painting something as complex as a locomotive, the last thing you want to do is get to the point where it's done and go, ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You put in all that time and all that effort, and then you're just not happy with it. So you want to take time ahead of time to plan it out and look at everything and listen to your intuition. Because it's probably got something, there's probably something right in there.
For sure.
Yeah, exactly. And iteration is key. I think one of the things I really wish I could drive home for other model railroaders is that, you don't have to get something right the first time. In the case of the Alta, the layout that, viewers will see behind me, but listeners will not. This is the second time I have built the exact same sized layout in this space. I had a layout that was nearly the exact same size that I built in 2015 from the ashes of a modular, a Fremo layout that really didn't work the time before. And I tore the first version of the Alta down in 2022 because I had a client that hired me to create a 17-car all-bud version of what the Greenbrier Express should have looked like if Ross Rowland had taste. Which, as we know historically, he did not. So I had to redesign it from the ground up, and I took it as a serious design prompt, like within the bounds of like had to use Southern Green, designed the whole 17-car, mostly Walthers Bud passenger train. And I had just not laid very good track on the first version of this layout. And I kept derailing, and it turns out it wasn't the cars, it was the layout. And it got to the point where it's like, are we going to do this? Are we going to demolish this whole layout because this one train that I'm building for a client doesn't work out? And the answer was yes. I went and ripped the entire thing down, cleaned this entire half of the room, vacuumed it, and started entirely new using zero of the materials of the previous layout.
And that's the key point, not using anything from the previous layout.
Yeah,
I mean, unless you're using, like, say, specific modules that are designed to fit together, or, like, if you build certain sections to such high standards that they can be rearranged or anything, it's usually better to just completely start over. Like we were talking in the last episode, it's like, the material that you build a layout out of, and most often the track and the scenery, are going to be all lost money when it comes to rebuilding a layout.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think that, various modelers and modeling magazines have pushed a weird, I don't want to say a toxic trait of, can I get away with this? But I feel like, having read a bunch of modeling magazines from the 70s forwards, there's a little bit of that, like, shortcut to success, sort of articles that we've all read.
Right.
And, quite honestly, especially being a professional layout builder now, like, you can't. It's going to bite you in the butt when you least expect it. I built 3 Fremo modules that were exactly to Fremo specifications, even down to finding the 3/4-inch Baltic birch to put them together in a place where finding that lumber was very difficult. And they lasted for precisely 5 years, and then they started to bow. And so when I had them back to back to back running, it was a little roller coaster going up and down between each module. And I started gusseting steel, and it still sagged, and I tried various other things. And it's like, if you do a shortcut, it will bite you in the butt. You have to do it right,
Yep.
There's ways to do bench work in very light ways, like those laser cut plywood modules are phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
And even like, what was it, Lynn Westcott, who did the Elberter bench work, back in the 60s, 70s, like, it's still brilliant, it still works. And this layout in particular is a blend of 3 experimental construction types I don't think I would use in a client's project, but it was fun to experiment with. I used metal studs to create an 8-foot span across one part of the layout. Most of the layout is 3 layers of insulation foam glued together on modular swing-away shelving brackets. And it was a great experiment. Would I build it this way today? Probably not, but I learned so much.
Right.
And that's the important thing. It's like, you can fail and you can try different things and have them not work out or have them sort of work out. But as long as you're learning, you're progressing. You're making progress. You're improving yourself, and you're continuing on in the hobby.
Yes, I strongly agree with that. And learning is the cornerstone of this hobby. It's a relaxing way to learn. I think that there's a lot of people, because the hobby can be, it doesn't have to be, but it can be very expensive. And with that comes stress. Like, I just spent, $400 on, this lumber or this tool or this locomotive or something. And, it has to be perfect because that was like a good chunk of my paycheck. And like sometimes either any one of those will fail on you and you'll feel sad or bewildered. And, the thing is not to feel sad, but feel hopeful. It's like, this is all part of the iterative process.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Now, to back up a little bit, do you want to kind of go over a bit about how you came up with the Alta California? Like, what was the process of, like, first off, what brought you to want to model something like this? And then how did you, like, what really pushed you into saying, this is what I want to model? I want to model Mexico in the mid to late 1960s to the early 70s. What brought you to that?
So, growing up, I grew up near a Santa Fe main line, and then moved north into Northern California and saw a little bit of the UP and the SP. What was then the Western Pacific, of course.
Right.
And being able to get that flavor of California railroading in my blood and like feel what that was like. But I also, at the time, didn't want to be a hardcore prototype modeler. I love capturing now, especially inspired by Tony Thompson. I love capturing accurate freight cars and rolling stock and making sure that the real world stuff is exactly right, while my freelance stuff fits in like a nice puzzle piece. And so thinking about, like, I love California railroading, short lines and stuff. And then one day I was going through an old book in a library, and I was like, what about Mexico? It has a lot of the flavors that I like in railroading. And like for instance, big picture, the last year of mainline steam in Mexico was 1968, which is shared with, second generation diesels, SB45s and GP40s. Like the extremely foamy thought of, a giant QR1 484 running right next to, an SD45 or a GP40 just lights my fire.
Yeah.
The other thing with Mexico in particular is, it's a train outside. I don't know if you can hear it. The other thing that particularly I love is blending both California and Mexico together and unifying them via railway. In real life, the SP to Mexico did a terrible job of trying to run a railroad in Mexico for the few decades that they did before they handed it over to the Mexican government to make the Ferrocarril Pacifico. And so when I was thinking about the Alta California concept, I was like, what if the SP never got the chance to absolutely suck at doing railroading in Mexico? What if somebody else did a better job, ran a better railroad, laid better track, and served the populace of Western Mexico, which at the time was very scattered, especially during and after the Revolution of 1917. And what if that helped reunify the country of Mexico and also build an economic river between California and Mexico and create those pathways that previously were very poorly served? I mean, for instance, the Sonora Baja California, which connects Mexicali and Benjamin Hill, the border is at Mexicali, Calexico, obviously, with the United States, was only built in the 1940s, when most railroads had started abandoning lines. Like, it's amazing that it was even built. So, taking the Alta California concept, what if the Alta California concept works on one major turning point? And let me think about this for a second. There's a science fiction. There's a science fiction writer, and her approach to writing alternate fiction is: what if you change precisely one thing, and then you write outwards from that? She wrote a book called Lays of Heaven. Her name escapes me right now. It's driving me nuts. She wrote a book called Lays of Heaven, and she explored various alternate realities for Portland, Oregon. And she did a magnificent job. And her idea was changing one thing and running with it and being multidimensional with it, which was really cool.
Ursula Le Guin.
Yeah.
Ursula
K. Le Guin. Yeah.
Le Guin. Okay,
so
thank you.
I was reading Le Guin at the time, back in the mid-2010s, and I was like, okay, what if I apply this to prototype freelancing? What if I change one thing? And the one thing I changed was, what if the narrow gauge South Pacific Coast, who was owned at the time by silver magnate James Fair, what if he didn't sell to the Southern Pacific in 1888? What if he said, screw the Southern Pacific, because they rightly were evil at the time. They were the octopus controlling all of California's politics, constricting all trade and commerce in the entire state because they owned the entire, all of Sacramento's state resources at the time. What if James Fair was like, you know what, I'm going to stand up to them and build a north-south railroad to Southern California and beyond that connects these points and use my silver fortune to do so. And so the idea is, following the 1906 earthquake, the South Pacific coast gets broad gauge, and then we start laying south to Los Angeles, San Bernardino, Mexicali, and then into Mexico using the right-of-way of the Sonoran Railway.
Okay.
And so goes the legend of the Alta California.
Nice. Yeah, I like that approach of just changing one thing, and that's helped me develop, like I mentioned in the last episode, that's exactly what I did for developing the Mississippi Pacific concept. It's the only change that I made was there was one additional clause in the Texas state railroad laws which said if a railroad outside of the state was bankrupt, it could only own one company inside the state. But there was a loophole where it didn't say anything about if that railroad could own any others. So through that loophole, it kind of allowed things to happen. But then from there, that kind of changed things, and the Missouri Pacific just ended up in a worse position, ended up going bankrupt again within like 10, 15 years.
Yeah, and playing with that and keeping it controllable by only changing one thing and having a good grasp of history also, of course, helps. A good grasp of how corporations, especially railroads, operate, and also industries also help. And cultivating that knowledge over many years is a worthwhile endeavor because you never know where it will take you.
Oh, yeah.
It's always fascinating.
Oh, yeah. I started off on...
It's fun to fall down the rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah. Mine started off... I ended up having to buy a second copy of this book because the first one just fell apart. But back, I want to say in maybe 2004-ish, my grandfather got me this book. So this is
Guide to North American Railroads. Yeah.
Yes, the second edition. So this was my grandfather got this for me as a birthday gift. It was my introduction into the history of everything. This really got me into learning what the different locomotives were, what different railroads were, understanding all their maps and routes and everything. This was my first foray into that, and ever since then, I took off faster than my grandfather had in his interest. And my grandfather was pretty knowledgeable on the history of railroads in West Virginia. I became knowledgeable in the history of the railroads in North America. Like, by the time I was in 6th grade, I had memorized every single locomotive manufactured for every North American railroad, like based off their model class, like what years they were made, who made them, their horsepower, wheel arrangements, everything. And even in some cases, say what?
The hyperfixation is real.
Oh yes, very. For me, I love that. But yeah, but between those.
I was going to say another book I would highly recommend in that vein, especially if you're interested in prototype freelancing, is, of course, The Railroad, What It Is and What It Does by John Armstrong.
Okay.
It was a book he actually wrote to the railroad industry, not as a modeling reference.
Right.
About how railroads operate, how yards work, how car forwarding and interchange works, just basically how railroad companies function. And if you are doing any prototype freelancing, it is invaluable to figuring out how you might want to build or combine railroads together to make your prototype freelance believable.
Oh yeah, I believe that also probably led into another book that he wrote about design. I believe it was along the topic of like designing railroads for prototypical operation, and literally went over every
realistic operation.
Yes, that one. Yes, I believe that led into that book. I have a copy of that one. And some people have said that's required reading. Although I wish it talked more about branch lines, but that's neither here nor there. So, but yeah,
definitely an opportunity to be made of somebody writing like a definitive guide to how branch lines work and how small short lines operate, and maybe even a little bit on captive railroads or military railroad movements and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like, the Alaska being a perfect example.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's both captive and state-owned.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be another John Armstrong coming down the pike, if you will, at some point to write that book. I would like to see that.
Oh, yeah. Who knows? Maybe I will. I've had my fair share of experiences. It's like chasing the branch line locals is something that I've been doing for years. When I was living in Port Huron, I used to chase, I believe it was L504, running the Paper Spur branch, which went from Tappan Junction on the west end of Tunnel Yard in Port Huron, all the way up to going underneath the Blue Water Bridge right at the mouth of the St. Clair River as it's coming out of Lake Huron. So you could sit there and watch trains and the lake freighters both at the same time. And on top of that, it had a very unique operation because the reason it went under the bridge first was originally to go to a locomotive facility that eventually burned down, but then a paper plant went in there. But there was the runaround was before you even went onto the boardwalk. So they would have to run around the train and then shove it all the way along the boardwalk to the paper plant, do their switching, come back. And on top of that, they also had a Basquill Bridge on that line that crossed over the Black River. And that one, during the boating season, which I believe is either April or May, the beginning of April or May, to the end of October, the bridge was always in the up position, and they had to lower it whenever they came down. Yeah, for every time a train went down, they had to lower the bridge. And between those, it was always a fascinating operation. And now, even where I live right now, I get to chase the Y220 on CSX as it runs down from Wansford Yard to Fleagletop Steel, the last customer on the old belt line. And that one's a little unique because it's one of the last places on the CSX line that uses exclusively end cab locomotives, the MP15ACs and the MP15Ts. And that is exclusively because the bridge over Pigeon Creek has been basically condemned to light locomotives. They could have used the GP15s, but CSX sold all those off. So we get to see one of the last stands of the end cab on Class 1 North American railroads right here just because of one bridge and a customer that gets served twice a week.
It kind of reminds me of the Wabash running their moguls.
Oh, yes.
After they had hired other steam locomotives because of that one bridge. On
exactly.
Line.
It is exactly like that. Cool. It's exactly like that.
Kind of constraint. What other fun questions do you have?
Yeah, well, I was about to get into the last question I have here, mainly, and that is basically, you've told us that you have pretty much made yourself a career out of your hobby. Do you want to talk a little more about what led you into that topic? And we have about 20 minutes left, so you can talk a little more. But tell us about how you came to the decision of making your hobby your career, and what that looks like compared to having it as, like, say, a side hustle.
So, yes, when I was in my teens, I did it as a side hustle. I primarily weathered and added custom, very carefully painted, hand-done graffiti to rolling stock. And I became quite well known for that back in the mid-2000s. But I wasn't a great business person because I was a teen. No teen is a great business person.
That's for sure.
I wasn't making as much money as I would. I was undervaluing my time and my effort. And I was producing great work, some of which I'm still very proud of. Looking back on it, it's like, wow, I can't believe I did that at age, 17, whatever, right? Like, that said, like, making sure you don't burn out is key. It's the cornerstone of this, because a lot of people love a specific hobby or interest. It could be knitting, it could be model railroading, it could be boating, it could be fly fishing, it could be anything, right? Mm-hmm. But the second you enter the industry, something changes in how you perceive how you're doing what you're doing and why you're doing it. For instance, I've kept, there's an old naval term called, like, keep your powder dry, right? You don't want to contaminate the cannon powder because it won't go off properly if you get it wet. Mm-hmm. And the key here with modeling is exactly the same thing. If you if you feel pressured into doing something that you're not comfortable with, don't do it. If somebody's going like, oh, you still need to be on Twitter in 2025. No.
Wrong.
Yeah. Or another one is like, oh, you should handle all your packing and shipping because it'll save time and money and no.
No. Do it doesn't. Like, even just selling on eBay, that makes it difficult.
Yes, or another one is like, oh, you should have a brick and mortar hobby shop, but then you do all the custom stuff off. No, don't do it.
No, you don't have to. That's excess tax dollars that I don't want to pay.
Yeah, and not only that, but like, one of the things, you have to plumb the depths of your psyche and figure out what is your day-to-day action that you actually want to do.
Right.
And a lot of people dream of having a hobby shop. And what is a hobby shop but being trapped behind a counter while people info dump at you? You should be filling orders that should be shipped out, and you haven't gotten their address yet because they haven't paid you yet. And it's just like, oh. And all the while you're making like you're making like $5 an hour. When you tally it all out, because like only one guy comes a week and buys a $300 locomotive, and the other stuff is incidental. Right. And you still have to keep the lights on and feed yourself and all that sort of thing. So think about deeply, what is the aspect of the hobby you really want to engage with? Mm-hmm. Because there's so many ways you can go incredibly wrong. And I deeply respect the people who actually genuinely love running hobby shops because they keep this hobby alive. like the passion of people who love customer service or love logistics management to make it easy and profitable for them to mail stuff all over the world. And, you know, to arrive on our doorsteps for us to enjoy. I love that. But I know I'm not that person. So I never got into that. The same with the custom locomotive stuff. Like, another thing that I had infinite difficulty was with brass locomotives. A lot of people would come to me wanting, because I'm decent at finishing and fixing brass locomotives, and I used to offer it as a service. I no longer do, because each and every one is unique and has problems that need to be diagnosed, and lots of parts are not obtainable, and they require fabrication stuff well beyond my manufacturing abilities. And like, I eventually said, no, I cannot do this anymore. And so, yes, a lot of this spiel is a lot of no up front, but I just want to make sure that before you make your vocation, your avocation, just keep that in mind. Your daily cycle. Like, for instance, my daily cycle that I have carefully honed over the years is I cultivate a list of clients who want who want actual physical layouts built in their houses, and I draw up the plans, and I prefabricate all the bench work off-site. I deliver it to them. I build the layout, lay the track, add the scenery, wire it, and make sure it runs beautifully on-site with them, alongside them, because I always want my clients to work with me, rather than me showing up and leaving and then being somewhere else. Like, that sucks.
Of course.
So I always have them try and work beside me, so it's like you're having a great modeling day with a great modeling friend. And making sure that you carefully pick your clients, whether it be for, you know, locomotive or weathering customization or layout construction. Make sure you're doing business with good people. Because choosing bad clients will result in bad relationships, will result in bad reputation for you. And that's something you have to be very careful about. So just keep in your gut. Is this a person who can pay reliably? Is it a person who encourages me to do my best work? Is this somebody who's patient enough when the parts from a random manufacturer don't come for 3.5 weeks because they're stuck in customs or something, and they're not going to blow their top at me for that? They realize they have patience to deal with this stuff, because nothing in this hobby happens quickly. And that's kind of by design, right? Like the classic saying of like, a layout is never truly done. That's absolutely the case. You know, you just stop working on it and we tear it down. You know, it's never done. You know, I mean, think about George Celios, right? He built the Franklin South Manchester. He, in his own words, over-detailed his layout, regretted it, and then removed a bunch of figures and vehicles and decluttered his layout because he had done too much. You know, perhaps the only person in history to have ever done that. But he knew that about himself, and he knew that that was not the story he wanted to tell. And so listening to your gut about this sort of thing and listening to your intuition is very important, you know, because we are, as modelers, we're very cerebral. We love the details. We love the blending our imagination with the knowledge of the real world and creating these amazing miniature worlds. Because like the cornerstone of model railroads is in many ways not the trains themselves, but the world you're building.
It's the world the trains run through.
Yes. That's the most important thing to keep in mind when you're building any layout, be it for yourself or for a job or whatever, is that you are creating a world of your own. You know, because my version of 1960s Mexico, although very much grounded in the reality of Guaymas and Empalme on the west coast of the Sea of Cortez in Mexico, is not 100% exactly as it was. You know, I blend in certain elements of things that I personally love. A touch of science fiction here or there. Some architectural or vehicle choices that I would like to see, right? Everything is freelance if you think about it from that perspective, right? Even the most strict prototype thing, even Lance Meinheim's, you know, Miami switching layout is still a condensation of time and space that is certainly recognizable as a Miami switching district, but it is his interpretation.
If you were to say that, like, even, let's go with Lance Meinheim's The Miami Rat, for example. If you were to say he is modeling this exactly prototypically, you say, okay, let me go out to the thing. Where's that piece of trash? Right. If you want it to be that, that's the level you would have to go, and no one's going to do that because no one wants to. That's not the joy of it. The joy of it is recreating what it looks like in your mind, not
Yeah.
what it looks like in the actual place.
Exactly, because
art historians will talk about the difference between realism, impressionism, and expressionism. They're three wildly different painting movements throughout the 19th and 20th century. They all achieve different goals. One of my favorite painters in the world is Charles Sheeler, a photorealist painter who was alive in the 20s and 30s, who most famously, at least for train nerds, did a beautiful painting of the side rods and skull and disc drivers of a New York Central J3 Hudson. And it's called, if you want to look it up, it's called Rolling Power by Charles Sheeler. I love that painting because it's precisionist movement. It's beautiful. But even at his extremely high level of execution, it is still his perception of what this J3 looks like, right? And we have to think about that in those strict terms. I think there's a lot of modelers, and, you could do a whole podcast about rivet counting, its pros and cons, but what it really comes down to is everybody pays attention to different aspects of the world. Yeah. And it's their interpretation of what they care most about. I've known modelers that work in the electrical generation industry, and every line pull on their layout is properly wired, and it looks amazing. But I would never ask anybody to do that on their model railroad. All the insulators and all the wires go to all the houses and go right back to the substation, which goes back to the power plant. It's really, really cool to see on that guy's layout because he knows what he's doing. But you shouldn't ever do anything you're not 100% confident about. And you can always iterate, as I said before. You can iterate towards learning those things. Like, I'm slowly teaching myself by using a couple of computer games, some city simulator games, teaching myself how to properly wire those things. So when I build, say, the electric shops behind me, which has streetcars in it, and a substation that takes the high voltage, converts it down to 600 volts DC for the trains to run, I'm going to try my best to wire that up properly, but I know I won't be doing it flawlessly. And so you just think about that in your grand scheme of how you're approaching it. People may care more about locomotives, or they may care more about freight cars, or they may like automobiles or architecture or road surface, traffic engineering. They may really care about those things. And that'll show through in your work. And the things that you don't care about will also show through in your work. And I don't mean that as a dig at all, but it means that when you take, there's a fantastic approach that modeler John Allen did back in the day. He would build a scene in its entirety and then use a camera and put it at human eye height in HO scale, take a picture of it, and see what was wrong, and mark it up with a pen and go oh, this needs to be moved, that's not right, blah, blah, blah. And then he would go back and fix it. And then he would take another picture and still find flaws, and then he would refine and refine until he was no longer bothered by what the picture had inside it. And I do that all the time when I build my model railroads for myself and my clients. I'll snap a picture of the town of Esquina here and be oh, what's wrong? Oh, wait, I forgot to do the landscaping in this front yard. Oh, there's no fence between these two buildings. There's no Coke machine out in front of the market. And then I'll go in and add those details.
Yeah.
Now, going back to the original question about the vocation advocation thing, maximizing your joy in what you're doing on a day-to-day basis is important because it'll keep you going. This is advice for any industry, let alone, model railroad, or even, if you're an artist or you're a small business owner or something, make sure that your day-to-day is something you want to do.
Right.
And so, with, like I said earlier, with my day-to-day, I'm working alongside my clients. In some cases, if they have rolling stock projects, I invite them to my workshop, and we work across from each other at my large workbench. And we get them done because I can go over and hold up the models how does this look to you? Is there anything you need to be changed? And he's right there and tells me needs another decal over here. Or let's do some rust streaks over here. And then it gets done just the way they want it, and then they leave satisfied. Now, I would strongly recommend not being in this industry. I'm probably one of maybe 100. I won't say on Earth, but it's very small. There's less than 1,000 model railroad builders on Earth, I would say, confidently. Professional model railroad builders. It's a small market. It's not I won't say it's not. Competitive is the wrong word. There's always going to be somebody who will want to build a layout, who will come out of the woodwork, especially if you do good work. But the problem is finding the right person at the right time in the right place.
Yeah.
I've been extremely lucky in that my 4 clients that I work on model railroads each week with are, in easy driving or transit distance. They're supportive of who I am as a person. They often feed me lunch, which is delicious. But I've also built that into the culture of what I'm building and how I approach this job. What you don't want to do is disrespect your own time.
Oh, yeah.
End up wasting money or fuel or effort or a commute for something that may be a bridge too far.
Mm-hmm.
When I was first starting out, my daily driver was a 1965 Ford Mustang that my mom left to me when she moved back east. Because, not going to take a 60s car and salt roads in the wintertime.
No.
But here in California, you can daily a 60s car if you really, really, really stick to it.
And you don't mind
money trying to keep it running.
And you don't mind the California emissions laws.
Yeah, well, I don't have to smog the car at the Mustang because the cutoff date right now is 1982.
Okay.
So it's a car that's earlier than that model year. Or it might be sometime in the 70s. It might be 73. Anyways, but...
Anyway.
Never mind.
Here or there. Neither here nor there.
Yeah, dailying a classic car is my only car because it's what I had. I didn't have the money to buy a newer car, and I didn't want to get rid of the Mustang.
Right.
Kept me within a certain range of my place. Like, I didn't want to drive 90 miles each way to go serve a client because that would be a grueling 1.5-hour drive.
Yeah.
Or longer. In a car that has no air conditioning, power steering, etc. But that was my choice.
Right.
I imagine that anybody listening to this podcast has a newer car than I did when I started. I now have a 2000 Saab, but that's
I mean, I have an 83 Dodge Ram pickup, but yeah.
Probably with the Cummins in it because it's reliable.
No, it's got the standard V8. The standard Dodge V8, although it's got a lot of work. It's starting to give me teething problems with the firing, but yeah.
Welcome to the model car.
But anyway, but I get what you're saying.
But what I mean basically is, like, don't overextend yourself. I often try, and still to this day, choose clients that are close to transit so I can just ride transit to go serve my clients well. Because I like riding trains. Big surprise.
Yeah.
If I can take BART or the Capitol Corridor or something to serve a client, I'll do it. But to that end, running a business is very difficult. For me, it's something that I found very comfortable with because I always had, I don't want to sound like a bad LinkedIn post, I always had an entrepreneurial spirit in a mocking tone of voice. And, like, although I liked working for others, it was nice to have the flexibility of being able to work for myself. And, like, some days when I was literally sick and couldn't go to work, I wasn't stressing out that I couldn't. I would just send a quickie email to my client and be saying, like, I'm sick and I don't want to get you sick. And they'd be like, thank you so much for doing that and reaching out. We'll catch up next week. And having that flexibility was an absolute godsend.
Right.
Because working in the industrial design world, oh, poor baby, you're sick for 4 days? Well, you'll have to find another job.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I don't want to work in that toxic environment. Yeah. The other thing about making a vocation an avocation is that burnout is very real. And especially if you're not valuing your time by not charging enough, or if you've created a pricing structure that is so Byzantine that the time that it takes to bill for your client is in proportion to the work you're doing. Keep it simple, keep it clean, keep it taxable and above board, and you should be fine. But in general, just be careful, especially if you're on your own. If you don't have a partner to support you financially through the thin times, because this is a very boom and bust industry. I wouldn't suggest doing this as a single person at all, ever, because there could be months, weeks, years where you might, a lot of the people who hire you are people who have, shall we say, vacation in Europe money. And they will disappear for an entire month. And if you only have one client and that client goes on a 6-week trip to France, you're not getting a paycheck for 6 weeks.
Right.
So being able to diversify both your client base and the kinds of work that you do is important. And that's true for any industry.
Yeah.
Anything that you want to make your vocation. And let me talk a little bit about burnout, because
yes. Yeah. Well, we'll need to make it quick, but yes.
Yeah.
But yes, I agree. It's important.
Yeah, keeping yourself from being burnt out is very, very important. Because no matter how much you love a hobby or an interest or something, there's always going to be some point where you have done something that you're not either proud of, you're not proud of the work you've done, or you're stuck in a rut, or clients are giving you trouble, or you're depressed because, macro political things are happening, right? And you just can't, right? And you might want to burn out. Knowing yourself and when to take breaks is very important, and making sure that your clients are understanding about that too. For instance, I took a 6-month break from producing videos in 2025 because I didn't have the bandwidth. Yeah. But now I'm back. I finally found a nice, happy rhythm that I can get back into and enjoy producing the YouTube videos for the Interurban Era channel. And it feels better than ever before because now I have clarity of mind and I can approach these the video production schedule, and I found a new way to do shooting my videos that is lower stress and takes less time overall to edit. And it's been far more enjoyable. And when you think about any of your jobs, be it model railroad or elsewise, that you're trying to support, like say you have a 3D printing job where you're selling 3D prints to people that you've designed or something. The majority of that job is going to be managing the 3D printers when they break or malfunction, cleaning the 3D printer, slurm thing in the bottom of the resin container, and packaging and mailing endless orders. So think about that. It's like you want to bring these things into the world, but find a way that suits you best.
Oh, yes.
Know yourself, know what you can do, know what you can't do, and know what you want to do.
Exactly.
And don't be afraid to subcontract certain things. If you have friends or fellow industry people that you respect, absolutely a subcontract. I work with one of my friends who is a carpenter of set and stage to build all the modules for all the layouts I build for my clients, because he can do alongside, we work together when we do it, but we work alongside each other, and we're able to build an entire layouts worth of modules in one single day in his workshop, because he has all the tools, he has all the expertise, and he knows the quick turnaround time, because stage and set requires stuff done yesterday. And this is like a nice relaxing afternoon for him to spend a whole day working on this thing. So don't be afraid to subcontract things when you need to.
Okay. Yeah. Good points all around. So, well, we've reached the end of this episode. I know, Dennis, you got to get off for your live stream tonight. So, yeah, you got like 15 minutes. So, Miles, thank you so much for coming on. This has been an absolute pleasure. Second recording with you. I enjoyed our random talk. I'll save that recording for some other time. But for those people that missed it again or they forgot, how can we find you again?
Yes, you can find me online in 3 places. The most logical place is interurbanera.com, which points to my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/interurbanera. Or you can find me on Instagram at the exact same handle, Interurbanera, on Instagram. If you want layouts built and you live in the San Francisco Bay Area, don't hesitate to shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to come out to visit your space and give you a quote.
Okay. Alrighty. So yeah, and
Coming on, Miles.
yes, thank you. And then as usual, you can always check us out in all the normal social media places, Model Train People. Check out our I'm trying to think of which one it is. I was gonna say we have a website, but we don't have that yet. We just have the link tree.
I won't spoil, but
yeah, but we at least have a link tree. So you can check us out on there. And then, of course, our Discord server, Model Train People. So, yeah. Thank you all for tuning in with us for this episode. And We look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care.